Why, thank you. And we have picture. Lovely. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. How are you today? You having fun yet? Arr, right? I mean, Ivica placed me after lunch. Thank you very much, Ivica. The hardest slot to present, actually. And not only that, I thought I had a pretty cool title, and then I had a nice quiz in the beginning. So I was gonna ask you, who is this fine specimen of the human species? And then I realized he's actually stolen my slide. Thank you very much, Ivica. So, but I think that you all saw this slide this morning. Douglas Engelbart, the inventor of the mouse, so a product that we basically use on a daily basis, where he basically says the digital revolution is far more significant than the invention of writing or even printing. That's a pretty strong statement, isn't it? At least I think it's a pretty strong statement. So that's what I was hoping to spend a little bit of time with you on. So as I realized I was speaking after lunch, most of you flew in yesterday, you know, some drinking last night, so I thought you're going to be sleepy, so I better keep this simple. I have 3 key takeaways, the only thing you have to remember when you listen from my talk. The first is we have an extremely interesting dichotomy in society. On the one hand, life, especially in the Western world, has never been better. Life has never been better. I know there are lots of negativos and apocalyptics and people that have all kinds of negative spins on how the world is going to hell in a handbasket. Forget about it. It's not happening. The world is getting better and better, and we have never had a better time to be alive in. And this is driven by technology and very specifically driven by digitalization. However, if you are a company, if you run a business, the risk of disruption for you as a company has never been higher. And I think that that's an important takeaway. Companies are actually having a really hard time these days. And to avoid this disruption, especially for the software-intensive systems industry, our research shows that there are 3 things that you have to be critically good at. You have to be fast, so we have to focus on speed. You have to be very good at data, using data, monetizing data, and effectively using data. And finally, you have to make the best possible use of the ecosystem around you. And that's what we're going to talk about. And then finally, because companies are having this challenge, this humongous risk of disruption, universities and the knowledge ecosystem around them have what I believe, fiduciary responsibility to help companies accelerate their pace of transformation. Those are the 3 key takeaways that I hope you take away from this talk. So what I wanted to start with is a little bit of trends in society and in industry, then go and talk about the stairway to heaven, then talk a little bit about the software center that I'm the director of, to give you a taste of what I and several of my colleagues are doing to help the Swedish and Nordic and actually European industry to accelerate their transformation towards a digitalized world. And by the time it says conclusion, you will never have been so happy to see a slide that says conclusion. So the first is, the world has never been better, as I already mentioned. Poverty is much less. Life expectancy went up 50% between 1950 and 2011. 50%, that's quite a significant improvement. The number of war deaths, with everything that we talk about, much less. And there is actually, with all the talk about discrimination and sexism and other forms, there is actually much less of it than what there used to be. And if you want to read a little bit more about this, there's a very interesting book, The Rational Optimist, that takes all those apocalyptics, people that talk about apocalypses, and basically proves with data that all these people are actually wrong. Why did this happen? How did life become so much better? I believe that this is because of, to a large extent, because of digital technology. If we look at mobile and smartphones, internet access, half the world has access to the internet, optimization to data availability, and connecting everything. At some point, Ericsson said 50 billion connected devices in 2020. I'm not sure what the current estimate is, but digital technology is what brings us this enormous improvement in the quality of life. However, if we go to companies, this is a quiz that I ask many people. How many companies that were on the list of the Fortune 500, so those are the 500 largest companies in the world in 2000, how many of those companies were still on the Fortune 500 in 2014? And the answer is more than half of these companies are gone. Yeah, so we see an enormous rate of disruption and transformation. So disruption in industry is actually the new normal. So if you look at the book Built to Last by Jim Collins, he actually does research in how long do companies last on the Fortune 500. And several decades ago, it used to be 30 years. Around the bursting of the internet bubble, it was down to 15 years. And the last research that I saw is that companies on average last 10 years on the Fortune 500. Which means that well over 2,000 companies have been on that list now. Basically, you become very successful, you get disrupted, you disappear. And what is it that happens? Well, these companies fail to innovate and build new core capabilities. That is what is happening. And what we see is that the new skills and capabilities that companies need are around digitalization. Digitalization is the new disruptor that we have in industry. Now, I'm not sure if you went through, I couldn't be here at the very first presentation, I'm not sure if you went through the definitions of digitalization, but digitalization is the use of digital technologies, this is Gartner definition, to change a business model and provide new revenue and value producing opportunities. It is the process of moving to a digital business. Yeah, so just to get clear on what it is that we're actually talking about, another consulting company that I'm borrowing from is the Boston Consulting Group, who basically shows what are the strategic building blocks for a digital transformation. And what you see is, of course, I want to enhance my products, but I also want to have data-driven services, digital services, and pure software products, licensed products. But it doesn't just address my products and services. It also addresses the way that I do sales, the way I manage channels, marketing. It affects R&D, it focuses on manufacturing and supply chain management, even HR, finance, and support are addressed by this. And that, of course, gets us to agile, but also systems and technology platforms and other things. So digitalization touches every aspect of a company. This is not just an R&D thing. This is not just a thing that you can leave to the software people. No, this is something that affects every part of the company. And not only that, software these days touches literally everything that we have in life. The first thing that I do when I get out of bed in the morning is I brush my teeth. How do I brush my teeth? I use an electric toothbrush by Oral-B. Last year, Oral-B, I can send you the reference, announced a software ecosystem for toothbrushes. I'm not kidding. There is a mobile software ecosystem for toothbrushes. The mobile phone will connect through Bluetooth with your toothbrush and will give you feedback on the quality of your toothbrushing experience. Did you push too hard, too soft? Did you cover all the parts in your mouth? Pretty cool. The enthusiasm is not exactly what I was looking for, but in any case. The last thing that I do in the evening is I set the alarm for the next morning. What do? Do I use some mechanical contraption? No, of course not. I use my mobile phone. And everything in between us and then is driven by software. If we look at logistics, infrastructure, sports, agriculture, forestry, electricity generation, communication, cars, everything these days is driven by software, and I think that's an important thing to be aware of. The reason now that things are driven by software means that we're moving towards a world where people will not want products, they want services. Yeah, the whole society is moving from ownership to access. I don't want to own a car, I want to have access to a car as a service. And this is leading to a very interesting transformation because this requires continuous deployment of new software throughout the lifetime of the product. It will not just be your mobile phone or your web application or your Windows. No, also your jet engine and your telecom equipment and your car will get better every day you use it because there will be new software pushed into it. And I can see many of you think, yeah, but this will never happen in the safety critical and security centric world. Yes, it is also happening, starting to happen in that world, as we will see in some of the examples that come later on. The entire world is moving to products as a service and continuous deployment of new functionality to the products that are out in the field. Another important trend is software size. People that are not very close to software actually fail to recognize this, but industry after industry is seeing this. The size of the software in our systems goes up with an order of magnitude every 5 to 10 years. Yeah, so every 5 to 10 years, it is not just that you grow 10%, no, you actually grow 10x. Yeah, this year, I've actually been a professor of software engineering for 20 years, and some of my friends start to ask me, Jan, you've been a professor for so long, have you still not solved the problem? How hard can it be? Yeah, clearly you're not very smart. But then I explained to them that, my problem changes with an order of magnitude every 5 to 10 years. And the architectures, ways of working and tooling that work for a 1 million line of code system, they don't work when you build a 10 million lines of code system. And the things that work for 10 million lines of code, they don't work when you're building a 100 million lines of code system. And 100 million lines of code sounds like a lot, but if you go to a modern car like the XC90, according to my friends at Volvo, there are 100 million lines of code in a car. And not only that, here you see the evidence for the graph that I was just describing. The last 2 car models that Volvo put out, this is, by the way, where I have to encourage all of you to buy an XC90. That was the condition for me reusing the slide. So please go out, buy one. I mean, they're great cars. Yeah, but the last 2 cars that Volvo put out had 100 megabytes of software in the car. This one, now that it has had a few upgrades, more than a gigabyte of software in the car and 100 million lines of code. We're talking about really big, very advanced and very complex systems. I don't think I have to tell you anything about the data in the field. But I have several slides in there, but I, in the end, kept only one. And it's very hard to find numbers. But I found one reference that claims that we are creating 50 terabytes of data every second. To be very honest, I think that's a gross underestimation. I think we are generating much more data per second. If you look at a self-driving car, I think it's generating megabytes upon megabytes of data, and that is just for a single car. I think that this is just the data that's created, that gets stored every second. And this doesn't look like it is stopping. It looks like it is just accelerating. Yeah, if the most advanced company that I work with on the data front, that company is an online company for hotel room bookings. I won't mention the name, but you can guess by now, I suppose. But they are generating 80 to 90 terabytes per day just from the website, just from how all their customers, their millions of customers, are using the website. Final trend, need for speed before we go into the Stairway to Heaven. Here you have 4 products. Quicken, which is a product by Intuit, a company I used to work for in Silicon Valley before I came back to Europe. eBay, Facebook, and Angry Birds. If you look at these 4 products, look how long it took them to get to 1 million and to 50 million customers. Quicken was introduced in 1984, and it reached 1 million users in about 6 years, and we never reached 50 million. 10 years later, eBay comes along. eBay takes 30 months to get to 1 million users, 80 months to get to 50 million users. Again, 10 years later, Facebook comes along. Facebook takes 10 months to get to 1 million users, and then 44 months to get to 50 million. And then only 5 years later, Angry Birds comes along, and Angry Birds hits 50 million users in about a month. They didn't even know how long it took them to get to 1 million users. It just, flew past. And for everyone with young kids, or not so young kids, yeah, Pokemon Go last summer, anyone? Yeah, we saw an enormous adoption in, actually I have a good friend, a German friend, who claims to drive his daughter around in his car because she is so interested in Pokemon Go, but he's the one sitting with the phone. But let's not go there right now. Societal adoption of new value-adding technologies. And yes, Angry Birds and Pokemon Go do add value in society. Societal willingness to adopt new technologies has never been faster. And the risk for industry is that if you have been taking a fast follower approach, yeah, so let's other people do the innovation, and if it's successful, I'll follow. You are actually risking yourself because the rate of change is going so fast right now that unless you are at the forefront, you're already left behind. And in an internet world, the winner takes all. That is one of the challenges that we're actually running into. Stairway to Heaven. I thought Stairway to Heaven was a pretty cool title. And about a year ago, I was in Australia, and I said, well, Stairway to Heaven, much nicer than the Highway to Hell, right? That got me immediately into trouble because the immediate response from the audience was, what do you have against Australian music? Because Highway to Hell is by, which is an Australian band. Thank you very much. But in any case, Stairway to Heaven is a 3-dimensional model that basically tells companies how should you evolve yourself along these 3 dimensions that we consider to be critical. The first is speed. How fast can you get things out from your company to your systems in the field and to your customers? That's the first dimension. We're going to briefly talk about that. Second, I have data coming back from my customers and from my products in the field. And I know there's a lot of talk about privacy, but trust me, 99.9999% of all the data that gets collected about product use, no one cares about you. They just care about averages. So I think we are perhaps sometimes a little bit over-exaggerating there. So it's about data. I just said a controversial thing, and everyone in the audience is now, I've just alienated my audience, I realize. Privacy is important, but data is important too. How's that? Is that better? Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out how this works. Companies get petabytes upon petabytes of data back from their products in the field and from their customers, but they make very, very poor use of that data. And we have to become much, much better at making use of the data. And then traditionally, especially here in Europe, companies were very, very demanding to do everything themselves. Yeah, if I have one company in the software center in Denmark, don't go and look them up. One of the persons they make pumps. And one of the gentlemen in that company said, you know, Jan, if there was iron ore in the ground under Bjerringbro, we would have had our own iron smelter too. Yeah, they want to do everything in-house. They want to do everything under their own control. And what we see is that companies need to become much better at only doing the things that you are uniquely good at and then focusing, working with your ecosystem for everything else. So we're going to briefly talk about speed first and then go through the other dimensions. I'm trying to talk as fast as I can. How am I doing? Is this okay? Yeah, okay. I'm trying to keep you awake because I'm just the opening act. Sarah is the real presentation this afternoon before coffee. So we've studied dozens of companies. Companies evolve through speed in the following fashion. First, you have traditional development. Things come out once a year, once every 2 years, maybe even every 6 months. Really boring and slow. For all the atoms people in the room, trust me, anything faster than once every agile sprint or slower than once every agile sprint, that's considered to be slow. Then you adopt agile. Agile is in principle an easy change because it only affects the R&D teams themselves. After agile, you go to continuous integration. So you have your R&D teams and verification and validation, and you get to a very fast testing cycle. Once you're very good at this, you move to continuous deployment. Because once you are at production quality, basically after every agile sprint, why have the software sit in the lab? Why not just push it out to customers? So then you move to continuous deployment. And depending on the company that you're in, some companies in this room release software every 2 weeks to customers. Some companies that I work with release software up to 50 times per day, basically. And once you are good at continuous deployment, you move to using your R&D as an innovation system. And the important thing here is that you can see with every change that we go through, the number of organizational units that are involved is actually increasing. So that's speed. Very interesting. If you want to talk more about this, come and talk to me. Then we go to data. Again, companies sit on petabytes of data, but they make very, very poor use of it. And what we see is that companies evolve in a predictable fashion. So the first is, do you have the ad hoc stage? Then collection, analysis, reporting, and decision-making based on data is all manual. If you want to do anything data-driven, it is a fantastic amount of work. The next stage is collection. As you probably know, the car industry, since the late 90s, every time your car goes into service, all the data is sucked out of the car and sent back to the mothership. So since the late 90s, the companies have collected lots and lots of data about what is happening in your car. Well, not in your car, but with your car. Let's put it like that. Sorry, that was a dangerous one. So collection was automated, but for a long time, automotive companies were very poor at making use of that data. The next step is automation. When you go to automation, you actually get those dashboards. So the data is collected automatically, analyzed automatically, and then reported on a dashboard of some kind, and you know what you're doing. The next step is data innovation. I will not mention the name of the company, but there is a company here in Sweden that builds mobile games. These are free games, they're puzzles, but what you can do is you can do in-app purchases. Yeah, so you can buy little gems that help you unlock the puzzles that you're actually building. When you're at the data innovation stage, what happens in this company is that first you have data analysts looking at all the player behavior and looking for interesting correlations. Once they find interesting correlations, they go to the relevant R&D or management team and they say, is this a useful correlation for you? If yes, they put this on the dashboard for that team and they take something else off. And then the team works with this correlation for a while, and then it reaches a point that it feels it understands it very well. And then they put that data analysis actually in the software of the product. So when you're sitting there playing this little game, what is happening is that 90% of the CPU cycles go into analyzing player behavior. So the first analysis that this game does is this player stuck at this level in the game? and if you're not stuck, then it doesn't do anything. If you're stuck, it basically then starts the second analysis. And the second analysis is, how likely is this player, based on millions of other players, to actually buy a gem at this stage in the game? And if the analysis shows that you're likely to buy a gem, the game will do nothing. It will just let you suffer until you go and buy a gem. If you're unlikely to buy a gem, the third analysis starts, and that is, if we would give this player a free gem now, how likely is this player to buy a gem at a later stage in the game? And if it shows that based on your player behavior, that you're likely to buy a gem at a later stage in the game, if they give you a free gem now, the game will give you a free gem. You all look at me like, that's cheating. That's not cheating, that's running a business. Yeah, so that's data innovation. Then you have a constant flow of new innovations. And then finally, the evidence-based organization. Google is a good example of that. I mentioned I worked for Intuit, so some of my friends at Google describe how Google does performance evaluation. Performance evaluation, your boss has nothing to do with it. What happens is that 6 people, 3 inside the same team, 3 in another team, or in other teams that you collaborate with, are asked to rate you and give feedback on you. And as part of the evaluation, these people are asked to give 3 names of people that perform less good than you, 3 names of people that perform as good as you, and 3 names of people that perform better than you. I can see the Swedish unions already stepping up. Yeah, and if you do that for every individual in the company, you get 6 times 9 names. You can, of course, you can just mathematically calculate who is the most valuable person in the company to who's the most useless person in the company. Yeah, and then salary increases and bonuses and everything else just becomes a mathematical formula. Easy, right? The enthusiasm isn't quite there. I'm not sure why that is. Why do I care so much about data? There's an old study by Standish Group that says that somewhere between half and 2/3 of all the features in a system are actually hardly ever, if ever, used. I clearly hurt that gentleman's feeling because he's leaving. Okay, I have 15 minutes. Yeah, so 2/3 of the features in typical IS systems are actually used so little, if ever, that they are a waste. We shouldn't have built them in the first place. Our own research backs this up. So if you are interested in this particular question, we do research. One of them is the HyPEX model, where we do iterative development, where we, rather than building a complete feature from top to bottom, including the kitchen sink, we only build the first slice. We measure how it is actually performing in the field, and based on the data that we get back from the field, we actually decide, should we build more of this feature? Should we just drop this feature? Should we build the feature in a different way? So you get a much higher degree of effectiveness in your R&D. The other thing that we're looking into in the context of the WASP program, and one of the board members, Sarah, is actually speaking after me, is we're looking into automated experimentation. The thing I just described is human hypothesis testing, but we're looking to build techniques that allow systems to run their own A/B experiments, their own variations of behavior, measure how these variations are doing, and then actually have the system run thousands of A/B experiments in the long run that will allow us to make systems better, that have systems completely autonomously become better every day you actually use them. So I think that that's pretty cool stuff. Final dimension is ecosystems. So ecosystems, as I already mentioned, some companies are extremely internally focused. I won't go through all of this, but what we're seeing is that companies over time move from being extremely internally focused to much more strategically engaging the ecosystems around them. And I don't have time to go into this, but I wanted to spend a minute on one aspect of the ecosystem engagement. This is a very simple model. I'm not very smart. When I walked into this room, the average IQ dropped dramatically, but so I can only do simple models. A simple model is the 3-layer product model. And that basically says for every product, every platform, every portfolio, you have 3 layers of functionality. You have a layer of commoditized functionality. That's stuff that you need for your product to work, but no one gives a flying hoot about it. When you got your mobile phone, you didn't think, oh, I'm so excited I can make phone calls. You expected it to be able to do phone calls. It was not a differentiator, it's commodity functionality. Then I have differentiating functionality. That's why I pick a Sony phone over a Samsung, or I pick an Apple over an LG phone. That's the differentiating functionality. And on top of that, there's a layer of innovative and experimental functionality. Now, the typical process is, I do innovation experimentation up here. I try out 10 things. Out of the 10 things, maybe one is successful because that's the average success rate for innovation, which is hard for many companies, but 10%, you're doing pretty well. Innovation experimentation, you try out 10 things, one of them is successful, it becomes productized and it becomes part of the differentiating functionality for your system. It sits there, and it sits there for, depending on the industry that you're in, for a few weeks, a few months, a few years, and then it commoditizes, so it falls down here. We've now asked well over 50 companies, what percentage of your R&D are you putting in commodity functionality versus what percent of your R&D goes up here? And the answer is 80 to 90% of all R&D in a typical company, not Ericsson, Sarah, other companies, 80 to 90% of all functionality in the company goes to commodity functionality, just keeping the stupid lights on. There is no reason why we should spend so many of our internal resources on commodity functionality. We should focus our most talented resources on the differentiating and innovative stuff. So in a typical company, most people look to left and right if they sit in a row like this, and they feel really sorry for the other 8 or 9 people in the same row that they're sitting. Yeah, so that's, I think, one of the challenges that companies have. So not only is half of all the features we build waste, in addition to that, 8 or 9 out of every 10 people in R&D are working on stuff that no customer gives a flying hoot about. I need to speed up, right? So we've developed something that we've called the 3-layer ecosystem strategy model. There's all kinds of beautiful strategies. I'm now going to discuss each of them in depth. No, I'm not. I want to spend my last minutes on what I believe is absolutely critical. As universities, as the knowledge ecosystem around universities, I believe we have a responsibility to help companies change faster than what they would do by themselves. And for that, we have formed the Software Center. We've been going for 6 years now. We started with 4 companies and 2 universities. We're now 10 companies and 5 universities, thanks to all the support of several people in this room. But we now have Tetra Pak, Saab. This is not the bankrupt Dutch car company. Not my proudest moment as a Dutch guy, I must admit. But this is the defense company, some representatives sitting here in the room. Siemens recently joined the Software Center. Very sure is in the Software Center. Access Communications, where are you guys? There you are. Okay, Access Communications is here. Volvo Cars, Volvo Trucks, Jeppesen, part of Boeing, Ericsson, and Grundfos are in the Software Center. And then as universities, we started at Chalmers and University of Gothenburg. We now also have Malmö, Linköping, and Mälardalen University involved in Software Center. And our goal is fast, continuous deployment of customer value. What does that mean? Well, I used to say, my dream is the next Volvo car I buy, every morning I get into that car, there is some cool new feature waiting there for me. And this feature is not, oh, it doesn't start, or this is going to be challenging, no brakes. No, these are features that make the car better every day you use it. And the interesting thing is, my friends at Volvo Cars tell me, if you buy an XC90, go buy an XC90, yeah, every 2 days you get new software into that car. Pretty cool, right? Not safety critical software yet, infotainment system software, but every 2 days there's new stuff being pushed into that car. A certain Swedish telecom company, who shall remain unnamed, pushes new software to live base stations every 2 weeks these days, and these base stations have 5 or 6, 9 uptime requirements. That's minutes or hours per day of per year of downtime. And so that means that the embedded systems world is actually moving towards continuous deployment. So the speed dimension is getting pretty far. So we're doing well. Our goal is, and sorry, this should say European, improve the software engineering capability of the European software-intensive systems industry with an order of magnitude. How do we do this? We build strategic partnerships, and we focus our collaboration on significantly accelerating their adoption. We put our work in 6-month sprints. We do not only focus very narrowly on technology stuff, we focus on business, architecture, ways of working, organizational aspects. And we do topics, work from things like continuous delivery, so that's continuous integration and deployment. Architecture, there are some people here working on architectural, technical debt, and interoperability if you want to talk to them. Metrics, customer data and ecosystems, but we also are putting a little bit of resources, most of the resources come from elsewhere, in autonomous systems, as well as in Internet of Things, and we're starting to look into Internet of Systems. And if you go out here, there's a stand that says Software Center. Our year report is there, so go and take a look at that. So how do we know that this is working? Well, we run a yearly survey, and this looks like a middle finger, and I apologize for that, but that's how the figure came out. Yeah, but we ask in a yearly survey, Software Center is significantly accelerating the adoption of novel approaches to software engineering at my company. 1 is strongly disagree, 7 is strongly agree, 4 is neutral. And as you can see, the majority of people feel that we're actually helping them move faster. There are a few rejectors, and we're trying to identify who they are so we can actually educate them. Sorry. So of course we have room for improvement, but we're actually doing really well. And to be honest, I travel a lot. Yeah, I spend a lot of time in Germany. I spend a lot of time in the Eindhoven region in the Netherlands. The Software Center companies are ahead of the companies that I meet in those regions. So I really believe that we have managed to find a mechanism to help these companies accelerate their rate of change. Conclusion. I told you, you've never been so happy to see a slide that says conclusion. Right? Right? So the first is, in the future, all companies will be software companies. If you look at a bank, what is a bank? A bank is a big IT house with a few offices attached to it. Yeah? If you go to companies like H&M and Zara, what makes them so successful? Their IT solutions that allow them to do supply chain management at rates that are, uncomparable to earlier stages is what makes these companies so successful. Every company that wants to survive this century has to become a software company and become critically good at being a software company. Yeah, my conclusion, I'm almost done. I notice she's getting nervous. Society has never been better. I know there are lots of negativos and lots of epochaholics out there, people that like to shout about the apocalypse. Life has never been better. Read Rational Optimist and a bunch of other books. Life has never been better. But companies are at severe risk. Yeah, the risk of disruption for existing industry has never been higher. Second, in order to survive this digital transformation that we're talking about, as a company you have to become critically good at speed, at data, and as ecosystems. That's the stairway to heaven that we talked about. And then finally, universities, I believe, have a responsibility to help companies accelerate their pace of transformation. Before I close, I have one question. Whose job is it to make this a reality in our Swedish and European industry? The first time I used this slide, I was at Ericsson. And one of the product managers at Ericsson said, you know, Jan, at Ericsson we would have bent the road too, which I thought was kind of funny. The reason I get out of bed every morning is not because I need to earn a paycheck. That's actually not a big concern for me right now. It's not because I want to publish more papers. I've published lots of papers. My concern is I've worked in Silicon Valley. I spent lots of time in Asia during my years at Nokia and when I was at Intuit. I am really concerned about the position of the European software-intensive systems industry. Between the innovative power of Silicon Valley and the cost advantages of Asia that we see, we are actually at much more risk of disruption as an industry than what I think today we're realizing. And what I want to invite you is to please help all of the companies in your context to actually accelerate their rate of transformation. I worked for Nokia. You know what happened to Nokia? Yeah, I left Nokia when Apple announced the iPhone. I wish I could claim causation. I can only claim correlation. I had no idea that the iPhone would be that successful. Yeah? But after I left Nokia, Nokia in 9 months went from being the top dog in the industry, shipping more than 400 million phones a year, to the poodle in the corner that everyone likes to kick. Now, I hate poodles as much as the next person. Yeah, and I think they deserve to be kicked. How am I doing so far? Yeah? But we're at the real risk that companies will be disrupted, and we have to make sure that we avoid the poodleization concept of the Swedish software-intensive systems industry. And with that, with the lady next to me being rather nervous, thank you very much for your attention. Are you want to? If you're very close to my microphone, it might work.
No.
No. maybe not.
Now we're on. It was my fault. Okay, thank you very much, Jan. Well done. I was not nervous. I knew we had actually got a few minutes from Stefan, so that was the agreement.
Thank you, Stefan. I appreciate that.
And you're going to pay him later.
Yes.
Good. So we actually got a minute or two for questions. Manfred.
So
sorry, Jan.
Mr. Smith.
Okay. So you are talking a lot about disruptive companies, but when digitalization gets more into whole society and, well, our university, well, could that also be disruptive?
Yeah, so...
I mean, what we are seeing now politically is rather scary.
Yeah. Scary? Oh, yeah. I'm really excited, actually. Trump is scary, I admit that. Yeah. Actually, we have Dutch elections going on. We have a guy, same hair, same orange face. I mean, it's scary. His name is Wilders, if you read the news. So I'm curious what will come out of that one. But let's not go there right now. There is a group of people that is afraid that with the increasing rate of automation, we will end up with a 2/3 society where 1/3 or 2/3 of the people will have jobs and 1/3 to 2/3 of people will not have jobs. I am not concerned about that at all. So far, society has always been able to reinvent itself and to create new jobs. And I read a beautiful quote last weekend that basically said, we will run out of jobs when humanity runs out of problems to solve. And I think we have lots of problems to still solve. However, having said that, I believe, and I'm going to kick a few people in the shins here, I'm not sure where he went right now, there are 2 industries that have not seen the same productivity improvements over the last 100 years that almost all other industries saw, and that's education, and that's construction. Yeah, those 2 industries have not nearly seen the same productivity improvements, and that's why education is becoming more and more expensive and houses are becoming more and more expensive, because we do not have the productivity improvements. So I think that these are the next areas for disruption. Is that scary? I don't like teaching that much anyway, so in that sense it helps.
Thank you, Jan and Jan. Short question from Manfred, short answer from Jan.
Yes.
I think it's the same line which we have seen here.
Yeah.
I think you got the first definition wrong in your talk. Digitization is not just about business.
No.
That's how
Yeah.
it looks.
Yeah.
And why does it look like that? Because all the companies that are around make it look like that.
Yeah.
But we have to learn it's much more.
Yes. So I have to say, Professor Breu, because he's German and I want to be polite in the German context, I told him before, when I grow up, I want to be like Manfred. That's what I said. I know that digitalization affects everything we do. It's just the way it is. Anything from also our personal lives are severely affected, or severely, actually in a very positive way affected by digitalization. But since this is a 2-day seminar and I only get 30 minutes, I focused on the impact of industry. Because I noticed that in many academic contexts, people feel, oh, industry, those are the people that always manage themselves and that's where we collect our tax dollars. And what I believe is that point, the tredje uppgiften here in Sweden, or the 3rd assignment of universities now is, I believe, a big part of that is to help companies survive this digital transformation, because the risk is real. I mean, the risk is real. There is no reason why companies like Ericsson and Volvo Cars or Volvo Trucks or any of the other companies in the software center should be around 5 years from now or 10 years from now. There's no reason why they couldn't be disrupted. And the only way we can do that, I believe, is by changing faster than the rest of the world. And they can't do that by themselves. They need our help. So that's why I wanted to go and talk about industry rather than about the other aspects.
Okay, so I'll let Daria, who's going to be speaking for the second day, have one short question just behind you.
This is eating into Sarah's time, and she wrote the foreword for my book.
On the note of the whole transitioning people's skills, higher education's responsibility, what would your vision be on where should we turn the screws on incentives? I mean, it's not happening now. We don't have regular learning that we need for this pace of change within the organizations, not in the higher education, not in the industry, nowhere we don't have it in the kollektivavtal. Where would you change incentives to make it happen?
Yeah, this is a great question, and I don't dare to answer it, because I like Patricia. Where's Patricia? Is she still here? There she is. I'm not allowed to vote in this country. How's that?
I'll offer the two of you to keep that discussion going on Twitter. because I think that's a discussion I would like to partake in too. And I'm not allowed to ask a question now because the time is out. So I'll give you the chocolate.
The lovely
and I'll
chocolate.
say thank you for that question, Daria. And we'll keep the discussion going on Twitter.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
And as